All right, hey, what's up everybody? Mitch here with Fit for Moto. Thank you for checking out another video, man. In today's video, I'm gonna talk about one of the cheapest and easiest personalizations you can do to your motorcycle to make it handle completely different than you probably think it should or could, and that's sag. Let's get into it. All right, so what is sag? Sag on a motorcycle is how much your rear suspension compresses when you sit on the motorcycle. Now, as per your manufacturer's recommendations, it's usually around 100 millimeters or so, and I have done videos that talked about this. But the reason that it's so important is because how much your bike sags completely affects how the bike handles. So it really is the distance between these 2 points. When you sit on the bike and the suspension compresses a little bit, it's going to increase your sag, right? So if we call these 2 points zeroed right now, when the bike gets sat on and the rear suspension compresses a little bit, that gap is going to change, and how much it changes is your sag amount. Now here's why that's so important. As the rear end of the bike sits down, if you think of it like a Harley or like a road bike, you know what I mean? It's going to start to ride like that. So as the sag is more and more, as it compresses more and more, the rear end of the bike is going to sit down, and then it's going to start riding front end high. And the reason that's so important is because that completely changes how the bike handles. And I'm talking, if you change your sag by, up to 5 millimeters, even 2 millimeters, it will completely change how that bike corners. Now, to personalize this for you, just go with your recommendations from your manufacturer. Like I said, it's usually around 105, somewhere in there. Your owner's manual will tell you how much that should measure out to be. That being said, it is somewhat of a personal thing. Some people like the front end of the bike to be a little bit higher. Some people like the back end of the bike to hold up a little more so the suspension doesn't compress quite so much. Here's how that's going to affect it. If the back end of the bike is held up and the suspension doesn't squish so much, the bike is going to steer much more abruptly, because if you think of it, now you're riding like a, like a drag car or something like that. Just the front end's lower than the back end, if that makes sense. When you go to steer, it's going to steer very, very abruptly. Okay, so here's why it's important if you go the other way. If the back end is lower than the front end, and like I said, you're riding it like a Harley, every time you steer, it's going to understeer. So the bike is going to take way more to try and get around a corner. And like I said, even a couple of millimeters makes a huge difference. So if you want to personalize how the bike is cornering, you can try messing with your sag a little bit. It's really easy to do. There's a couple nuts on the rear suspension. The top one is just a lock nut, so it's going to hold the bottom one in place. Back the top one off. Then you're just going to, if you need to increase your sag, you're going to loosen off the compression on the spring, because you don't want it to be so stiff. You're going to loosen that off so the bike will sag more. If you want the back end of the bike to hold up a little bit, which means you want the bike to steer a little harder, right? So the back end stays up a little higher. Then you're going to want to increase the pressure on your spring. So you're going to want to clockwise on your spring on that nut to compress the spring down, which means the back end won't sag so much because it's preloaded already. So does that make sense? So if you want the bike to steer less, you need to loosen the spring off so the back end of the bike sags more, rides more like a Harley, so it's not going to steer quite so hard. And then if you want it to steer a little tighter, maybe you're finding that if you're in a rut, you're having an issue getting the bike to steer through the rut, then you're going to want to get the back end up higher. So the front end, it stays a little more level that way. The bike's not so sagged. Then it's gonna steer a little harder through the rut, and that might help you out too. So like I said, really easy to do. There's a couple tools that I'll link below on how you can check your sag. And then as far as adjusting it, it's just those 2 nuts. Don't forget to tighten the top one again so that the bottom one doesn't back off at all. And you want to play with that a little bit. It doesn't take much of an adjustment to make a difference. So, adjust it by maybe 2 millimeters. Go out, give that a try, see how the bike handles. You might like it, you might hate it. Maybe you didn't even notice a difference. Try another 2 millimeters. See if you notice a difference then. That, I would say, is one of the cheapest and easiest ways to really mess with your personalization of your bike and get it to where you want it. I have a setting that I'm absolutely comfortable with. And if it's off by a couple millimeters, I will know immediately, because the bike just won't steer the way I want it to, and I'm finding that I have to oversteer in corners, or it keeps wanting to come out of a rut, or whatever that is. So try that. Let me know. Leave a comment, hit subscribe for me. Let me know your thoughts on your sag, whether it helped you or not, and we'll see you in the next video.